Hi, I'm Todd Malone. Today we're joined by Senator Bernadette Clement. Welcome back to the show, Senator.
Always good to be here.
Lots to talk about.
Sure.
Just recently had a federal election. First and foremost, and thank you again for being a co-host and co-anchor that night right here on your TV. We appreciate you coming in and taking the questions.
My pleasure. This is my job.
Well, it's always great to get that insight. But let's get right into the election. Obviously, you got a big role in Ottawa and right across Canada. But how is this going to affect your role? Or let's go first of all, what's your thoughts on the election?
Well, wow, interesting times. I mean, it's a strong minority. Some people have been very angry that it wasn't a majority because, we need to face the president of the U.S. But I think that a minority government will give us opportunity to collaborate, right? Every party will have to deliberately think about how to move forward. And I think that the parties will be able to come together and unite to face up to the tariff trade wars, face up to the conversations about national unity. So I'm feeling positive and hopeful that that we're going to be able to work together and collaborate properly. The dust is settling. And of course, leadership of the various parties has to also settle. But in the meantime, I think, and I've been meeting with senators all week, by the way, because we have continued meeting throughout this prorogation period. And now we were meeting to sort of evaluate how to plan for this next session. And we're all feeling like we're going to be able to work through this.
Now, Bernadette, we said here before, you and I, right here, in regards to minority governments, I call them working governments, and you and I have agreed on that.
Yep.
But when we talk about the dust settling, let's talk about Mr. Poilievre. He's losing his own seat, by a few thousand votes. How does he survive?
This is going to be difficult. His persona as a leader has always been, when we picture him in the House, right? Standing up, talking about accountability, being really firm and strong. Without that seat, this is difficult to picture him in sort of a different temporary transitional style leadership. So I think it's going to be difficult. There's no question that he has support around him. We're hearing that now in these days since the election. So there's no question that he has support. But let's see how he's going to navigate how he looks and acts as a leader in the next few months.
And we alluded to it on election night in regards to some of the commercials that came out from the Conservatives and, we're using the word clowns and so forth. But there's a stigma with it. Now, you said that he has support, which we've heard through the national media, that he does.
Absolutely.
But it's from within his caucus. He needs to get the support out in the voters. And some people are saying maybe he peaked.
Maybe. I mean, I think they're analyzing who supported him, right? He had support. He had a lot of support in Ontario, right? Yeah. And that's significant. He did not have significant support in Quebec. That's significant. Apparently didn't do as well with women voters. That's also significant. Did better with younger male voters. So I think they need to figure out, where his strength is and how he can diversify. His profile and how he projects. There are some issues around, how this last election went. There are strengths, but I think that the losing of your own riding and losing your seat, a place, in which he was most effective, I think that is very problematic for his leadership.
And when you talk about how people project themselves, let's talk about Mr. Carney.
Yes.
I think that was probably the strength that he brought into this election.
So Mr. Carney, Prime Minister Carney has good timing. One always wants that in politics, but he also has a brilliant resume, and so that comforted a lot of voters, and I think that's important. He now has a seat in the House, and that's going to be a steep learning curve for somebody who has not yet occupied that space, right? As experienced as Mr. Poilievre has been, Prime Minister Carney really has to start feeling really comfortable and looking comfortable in that space. He's a quick study, though.
Yeah. And to your point, he's going to have some time now too, because actually the watchdog's not going to be in the House of Commons, Mr. Poilievre.
Well, I mean, there are other watchdogs, but yes, that'll be.
Well, they're best debaters.
Yeah, but that'll be an interesting.
Right.
That'll look interesting to Canadians, right? And the projection is that we're back on May 26th. I think we're still waiting for absolute confirmation on that, but that's certainly what we're planning for. So it's coming up quickly.
And Bernadette, let's talk a little bit about the NDP situation as well. Mr. Singh obviously resigning that night based on an interim leader being selected.
Yes. I found it, and I said that to you, I found that Mr. Singh really, really campaigned hard. In the last few weeks, once he had clarity that he wasn't running for prime minister, but rather running to hold parties accountable, right? Speaking to that, the use of a minority government. He was very effective. Yeah. He was effective in those debates. He was effective in the French debate as well. So I'm sorry to see him go. Really, I am. But at the same time, I want to honor him and say that he's done a lot of good work. Now, what's the future? I know they're speculating about MP Heather McPherson as a possible leader. There's lots of speculation, but I know her. I've met her, traveled on a parliamentary trip with her. She's quite brilliant, out of Edmonton. So that might be, I think there's interesting potential for the NDP. And now that we see the vote, the riding distribution, the NDP still has some balance of power potential in this current government. So yeah, let's see what the NDP does internally. But again, I'm hopeful that they will come out with some strength.
And I'm with you on that one, because I think they're so vital to our House of Commons and our political system. They do keep parties alert, for lack of better words. But let's finish off now with the Green Party. They're down to one, and it's Elizabeth May, and she seems to be lobbying for different roles already.
She is a fascinating leader, and I'll just say this: the only woman. Yeah. I have felt as a woman politician that there was, we lost some ground in terms of women running for office and women in office. So Elizabeth May is important for many reasons, not just from an environmental perspective. She's also important because she knows that house and she knows the rules better than most. So she will have a role to play. I have to say, the other Green MP, Mike Morris, from the Kitchener area, is somebody I also worked with on various projects. That's a big loss. He was a good ally in all sorts of different ways. And so the Green Party also has to do a lot of internal work and external work, like connecting to Canadians and speaking to the relevance that they should continue to have.
Bernadette, also, we talk about the situation in the House of Commons now. Obviously, the Senate works closely with the House. Stability. What kind of stability do you anticipate we're looking at?
Well, again, I'm going to say I'm hopeful. This is a strong minority, and I think that we have some unifying factors. The President of the United States. We have to focus on the economy, focus on tariffs and the impact that tariffs are going to have on small, medium, large businesses all across the board. So I think that there is going to be stability around that. The Senate is very important in the first days because the speech from the throne happens in the Senate. I'm personally really looking forward to that. But that's going to tell us what priorities this government has. And that's going to give us a sense of how stable and how collaborative they're going to be able to be over these next few months.
Bernadette, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We want to get your mayor's hat back on for this
Sure.
next conversation. Obviously, you know what's going on here in the province of Ontario. Mr. Ford, the Premier's, he's expanding the reach for strong mayor powers for municipalities. Most mayors that we're talking to are declining or councils aren't accepting. What's your thoughts?
I am not comfortable with expanding those powers. The mayor's role, and there's many, but one of the roles is to build relationship with his or her council, with each individual councillor, with the council as a whole, so that by the time you're getting to the decision making, you're working from a place of trust, of transparency. If you give all these extra powers to the mayor and the mayor doesn't have to do that work, of building relationship, of building consensus, then I don't think you're going to end up with solid decisions. You're going to end up with a mayor that has a lot of power, which doesn't feel very democratic when you have councils. So you have a mayor with a lot of power who's going to be able to make these decisions, but that doesn't always feel like the best decision-making process. And councillors will feel uncomfortable with that. That may cause division within councils. So I don't see that as a helpful process. I really don't. I get where the Premier's coming from. He's like, well, there's priority issues and you need to move urgently. But sometimes if you move by building consensus, by building relationship, you're going to get a decision that is more solid, that is going to last for the long term, and that is more efficient, effective from a cost perspective, from a trust perspective in the long run. So sometimes moving with urgency is not the best way, because you might get a decision that'll just crumble or create division.
So Bernadette, is it fair to say we could fracture councils who are democratically elected?
I think that there's a risk around that. And I mean, we certainly had our own local council here in Cornwall speaking about it. And we saw where that conversation went, right? And so I think councils can tell instinctively that could be a problem for the long term, especially around really controversial decisions or decisions that are sensitive for communities. You really want to be able to have, full discussion around the council table. And if the mayor is seen as having outsized power, that's not going to be helpful in the long run.
And that's the fear I think a lot of people are saying or sharing right here on this set is the, what's the perception in the community or how or who is now controlling council. As you had said, council is democratically elected, and there's in this case 11 in Cornwall, including the mayor. And I'll tell you, for council members, I'm sure that they're wondering who's riding or who's running the ship if they're not all participating.
Right, exactly. And it's building relationship. And that takes time, I can tell you. When I was mayor, I spent a lot of my time working on building relationship with each councillor and then with the council as a whole. And I can tell you that when the pandemic hit, the fact that we had done that work together meant that, we could behave and act quickly and with trust amongst ourselves throughout some urgent situations. But it's because we put in at the front end, the building relationship work together. And
finally, you used the word trust. I want to talk about Mr. Trump. In regards
I'm smiling. I don't know if I should be smiling.
Well, a senator, obviously being a senator and obviously being close to the House of Commons and having a new government in place now, what's your thoughts on what you're hearing in other states recently?
I'm concerned. He was quiet there during the latter part of the campaign, so we started to wonder. But then he made comments towards the end of the campaign, reaffirming his goal. Reaffirming his understanding that somehow there's this imbalance between Canada and the US. And it just feels like he doesn't see how integrated our economies have been to the benefit of both nations. And so that's the concern I have. I've traveled quite a bit during prorogation across the country to work on a particular project as a senator. And I had political conversations, in BC, in Manitoba, in Alberta. Many Canadians are very worried. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, you're concerned about the President of the United States. You're concerned about not being able to trust what he's saying or where he's going, and Canadians are worried.
And you mentioned Alberta.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of fear right now in our own country based on maybe the conversations happening between that premier and that president.
Correct. Alberta felt, when I was there, I was in Edmonton, felt unsettled. They are such a big economic driver for our country, and we in the rest of Canada have to accept that and acknowledge that. So they have concerns about how dominant Ontario is in the national conversation, but they have concerns about President Trump as well, and about what that's going to do to them. And I think that they're caught between very powerful voices because their premier has a very powerful voice too. So it feels unsettled in Alberta.
And my last question, this
Yeah.
will be the last. In regards to our election with Mr. Trump, what did you think about him peeking his nose in and out of our election based on comments?
It felt like, it felt like he had a lot of influence. It felt like the outcome of our election had some impact from those comments, from the fear that he was instilling. So, I'm trying not to be resentful, because we have to go back to Parliament Hill and we have to be effective, right? We have to be able to collaborate together and behave professionally in response to the president. So, I'm working on keeping that frustration and anger down, because it's not going to be helpful once we get, into supporting professional conversations with the president. But there was definitely an impact there, and will continue to have an impact on us.
Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
On behalf of Senator Bernadette Clement, I'm Todd Alone for your Senate Update right here on your TV.